Been thinking about what to talk about, you know, a little bit about why I'm talking to you at all. I'm a fisher of men, and that's a reference, Bible reference, that Yeshua the Messiah, also known as Jesus Christ, is the one that coined that phrase, fisher of men. And he instructed those that believed in him to become fishers of men. And that is to go out into the world and try to find those men, which he referred to as fish in an analogy, and catch those fish, or at least round those fish up, or instruct those fish in the words of the Messiah, so that they could come into the catch. And so that's what I'm doing, is I'm trying to speak to whoever it is that's on the other end of this presentation, to see if you might be one of those fish that belong to Yeshua the Messiah, the Savior of the world. He came to earth some thousands of years ago, a God-man, a man-God, and sacrificed himself in replacement, or instead of us, which deserved the death penalty for our sins. But he loved us so much that he was able to satisfy the legal requirement by sacrificing himself in our place. And then he worked many miracles before he sacrificed himself. He worked many miracles while he was on earth to prove that he was the Messiah, and then he laid down his life for us. And this is all incredible, supernatural, otherworldly, and earthly. It's a story that I don't believe that any human could make up, that a man from thousands of years ago could do these things that he did. These are recorded in the New Testament portion of the Bible by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and then in the rest of the New Testament, different references are made of the wonderful things that he did. And then he sacrificed himself on the cross by essentially manipulating the government agents, the Romans, and also the leaders of the Jewish nation, the Pharisees, lawyers, the Sadducees, and the priests, and manipulated these people in such a way that they, in their minds, had no choice but to crucify him for the crime of claiming to be God. And in their eyes, any man that claimed to be God deserved it's blasphemy. And a man that claims to be God is in the laws of their time needs to be executed, because that's blasphemy for a man to claim to be God. But the whole problem was that, what if he really was God in the flesh, which he claimed to be? Well, they tried him and demanded from him finally at the trial to say whether he was or was not claiming to be God. And apparently he said yes. And they condemned him to death. And the miraculous thing was that he had told them that if and when they killed him, that he would rise from the dead, which was the ultimate proof that he was telling the truth. They were aware, these government officials were aware that this miracle worker had claimed that he would rise from the dead. So they didn't believe him. Obviously, they didn't believe that he was who he said he was, but they were savvy enough to realize that he might try to pull a trick on them and get some of his people, his disciples, to snatch his body and hide it. So they posted a guard at the tomb, and in spite of posting a guard, he still managed to get out of the grave and disappear. And this was a guard of, I believe it was temple guards from the Jewish temple that were the guards. So whatever happened in that night or that day, nobody knows exactly, but 3 days later he wasn't there anymore, and the guards were unable to prevent it. So the temple authorities obviously would have started a search for the body, but my guess is that those temple guards that were there knew the real truth and probably had seen him rise from the dead. This is not mentioned in the chronicles of the Bible about exactly what did happen, but my guess is, one of my guesses, and it's just a guess, is that the guards were present when he rose from the dead, and they actually saw him. Of course, they would have been petrified beyond belief at what had just transpired, and they would have run back to their commanders and said, hey, a really strange thing happened, and a ghost appeared or something, and it was him. And he rose from the dead, and he was there and probably talked to them. So, of course, those commanders would have immediately reported to the higher authorities, which were the high priests, and they would have stood in amazement and listened that these people were saying that he had risen from the dead. So it's my belief, reading between the lines, that the temple priests, the high authorities there, knew that he had managed to pull off this miracle. And that's probably why, if you read the story carefully, you'll see that the chief priests, the high authorities, didn't make a very serious attempt to get the disciples of Yeshua and torture them into telling where they put the body, because they would have already been aware that that isn't what happened, because those guards were eyewitnesses to what really did happen. So it's anybody's guess or conjecture what was going through these people's mind, but the problem with people that don't believe that Yeshua was the Messiah is that they're not going to believe it. It doesn't matter what happens, they just aren't going to believe it. There are those that believe it and those that are never going to believe it. And in fact, Yeshua did miracles, tremendous miracles, in the sight of some of these temple authorities, raising people from the dead, tremendous proofs that he was God indeed. And they still couldn't bring themselves to believe it. somehow or another. All right, Yeshua himself explained it this way. He said that my sheep will hear my voice, and another's sheep, that is the sheep that belong to the devil, will not hear his voice. So that's just the way it is. Some people are going to see it, and some people are not going to see it. I'm one of those that, when I heard the story, finally, for the many times I heard it through the years, and one day it finally hit me right between the eyes. Hey, this is real. This man really did do these miracles, and he really did rise from the grave. Other people who were, friends of mine, members of my own family, I would tell them the story, and they would, fairly respectful, that I had come to this conclusion, but could not see it no matter what, and no matter how hard I tried to explain it. They just could not come to the same conclusion. He said his sheep would hear his voice. And there may be some of his sheep out there, I say on the other end of this video, that may be his sheep, and it may be time for you to open your eyes. You may have heard the stories, you may not, I don't know. But I'm hoping that my words will spur you into inquiry as to the truth of these allegations that some thousands of years ago, roughly 2,000, I didn't want to date this video, but that pretty much did it. Some 2,000 years ago, a little bit more. This man was born in Bethlehem in the kingdom of Israel, grew up to be about 30 years old, and declared himself to be the Messiah at his home synagogue. He read from the ancient prophecies the part that said that he was the Messiah. And he told them that that prophecy had been fulfilled that very day, thus declaring himself to be the Messiah. He went about to preach in the villages and towns of Israel, work miracle after miracle after miracle, and teach. Never bothered to write any of it down. He wasn't an author. He was God in the flesh. He left that up to his disciples to chronicle what he had done. And probably only a small percentage of what he actually did was ever written down. The Bible actually says that. And they said that he did many more things. It just was too big to write down. He healed all people that came to him. And I'm telling you this because I can't help it. It occurred to me the other day when I was thinking about this. Here I am in my 60s, and that I open my mouth and I have no choice. I can't stop it. It just comes out. It comes out without thinking about it. It just comes out. And I thought of this saying, a dog has to bark. It's like I was listening the other night to my dogs barking at the moon and barking at night. They can't help it. And a bird sits up in a tree and they can't help but make and sing bird noises. And that's when it occurred to me that I'm an animal too. And I can't help this. It just comes out of my mouth. Can't be stopped. Nobody could stop me. It may be foolish. I may be wrong. I don't know, and I don't care because I don't know. It just has to jump out. It's part of me. Where the thoughts come from, I have no idea. Whether they come through the air, like a radio transmission. That's what Nikola Tesla thought about the miraculous inventions that he came up with. He thought they were transmitted through the air. Does it originate in my brain by some circuitry in there that's, electrical impulses jumping around in there? I don't know. How could it? How could it originate in my brain? Because I can't imagine how I came to these conclusions, where these things came from. It just comes. I choose to think that it comes from Yeshua himself or his spirit. It's rather miraculous in a way that these things do just come to your mind and you just go on and on. You don't think about it. It just comes. These words that I'm saying right now are to me, it's almost like a river or a stream just flowing through my brain and out my mouth. Have no idea. I don't know where it comes from. Upriver somewhere. Out of the mountains. Spiritual snow falls on the top of the mountains and melts and flows down streams and flows down and down into the lowland and into the rivers, and down it comes out, right out of my mouth. That spiritual river. If this kind of talk sounds interesting to you, you just may be one of those lost sheep. It's another way he mentioned that he analogized his people as lost sheep. Fish, his fish, people that were going to believe him. If this sounds interesting to you, then jump in that Bible and read those stories about him, historical accounts of what happened back 2,000 and a little more years ago. And if it's not interesting to you, I can just about bet you dropped this a long time ago, so I'm probably not talking to you at all. You're doing something else right now. You don't hear this. And I don't expect a lot of people to hear this either, by the way. I don't think it's any kind of mass audience that I'm talking to, because Yeshua made it clear that only the few would hear him. The great mass of people do not hear his voice. So if you happen to be out there, why I'm going to say why I'm doing this again. I was told to do this. He instructed those that believed him to get with it and get their mouth open and get their brains in gear and figure out a way to get the message out to those that haven't heard about it yet. I have no idea what the video is going to look like, because I just stuck it out the window and focused it to infinity out here on this beautiful patch of woods. It's in the middle of, it's at the 1st of February. Southern United States. Call this a branch right here. I'm up on a little hill, and this is where water flows down to the creek. Water flows to the left as you're looking at it. 200 or 300 yards down that way, it runs into a creek. The creek takes a left-hand turn, flows down to another creek, and that creek flows down to a river. The river is called the Oconee River. And the Oconee River runs down again for another maybe 20 more miles and joins up with another river. The two rivers come together. One of them's called, the other one is the Ocmulgee River. And the Oconee River join together and form the Altamaha River, about 20, 30 miles from here. And that river flows down, winding and winding back and forth, and flows into the Atlantic Ocean near Jekyll Island, Georgia. at Brunswick, Georgia, and joins into the Atlantic Ocean. So I just showed you where we are looking. We're looking at water that flows into the Atlantic Ocean. Probably, I don't know how long it takes it to get there, a week maybe from here. So this is Gardner Israel talking to you from the location that I just described. And I'm hoping that my words would help you. I don't expect that I'll ever know, because I'm not contacting you. I'm not asking you for any money. I'm not asking for any recognition. I'm just doing it because I can't help it. This is Gardner Israel, signing out.